Silent fear does not live in your mind. It lives below thought, below language, below the stories you tell yourself at 2 in the morning. It lives in the tissue, and here is what that means for you right now. While you have been trying to think your way through anxiety, while you have been practicing gratitude lists and deep breathing apps and the occasional glass of wine to take the edge off, your body has been doing something else entirely. It has been quietly archiving every unexpressed alarm, every swallowed grief, every moment you smiled through something that deserved a scream. Not in memory, in meat, in the dense connective tissue called fascia that wraps every muscle, every organ, every bone in a continuous unbroken web from the soles of your feet to the base of your skull. Fear that finds no exit does not evaporate. It compresses. It shortens the exhale by a fraction of a second. It pulls the diaphragm slightly upward and holds it there. It cinches the psoas, that deep corridor of muscle running from your lumbar spine through your pelvis. The muscle physiotherapist Liz Koch has spent decades calling the muscle of the soul because it is the first muscle to brace for impact and the last to let go. Over months, over years, this compression becomes posture, becomes personality, becomes the vague, persistent sense that something is wrong, even when nothing is wrong. That stillness itself is somehow dangerous. The hidden cost of this is not just tension, it is the slow confiscation of your aliveness. When the nervous system is chronically braced, it cannot fully access what neuroscientist Stephen Porges identified as the ventral vagal state, the condition of genuine safety, of open engagement, of feeling at home in your own skin. You become functional. You manage, but you do not fully inhabit. You stop tasting food as deeply. You stop laughing from the belly. You stop sleeping into that soft black nothing where restoration actually happens. You become, as Bessel van der Kolk wrote in his landmark work, The Body Keeps the Score, a person slightly outside yourself, watching your own life through glass. The Apache people of the American Southwest understood all of this, not as poetry, but as practical anatomy, their ceremonial breathwork tradition, known in some oral lineages as nada, idilkid, which translates roughly as the unsnarling of what is wound, worked directly on these precise pathways centuries before Western medicine possessed the vocabulary to name them. This was not mysticism as separate from the physical. This was the physical, addressed with extraordinary precision. And what this practice offers you is not information about your fear, it is the actual metabolizing of it, the conversion of compressed survival energy back into available life force, returned to you through the one system your body never stops running. The breath itself, the original language spoken before thought arrives. Stay with this. What follows is not a technique, it is a remembering. To understand why this works, you need to understand what fear actually does to the architecture of the body. Not the sensation of fear, but its structural aftermath. When a threat is perceived, real or imagined, the amygdala fires and the body prepares for action. Stress hormones flood the bloodstream. The diaphragm stiffens, moving into a high chest pattern that keeps you in sympathetic arousal, ready to fight or flee. This is useful. This is ancient and intelligent. The problem arrives when the threat passes, but the body never receives the signal that it has. The discharge never completes. The shaking that animals do after a predator encounter. What biologist and trauma therapist Peter Levine describes in his foundational work, Waking the Tiger, as the completion of the survival cycle, gets suppressed by the civilized human imperative to compose yourself, to be fine, to get back to work. What remains is a body locked in a posture of readiness that has forgotten what it was ready for. The diaphragm does not return to its full excursion. The fascia, which researcher Hallie Langevin at Harvard has demonstrated through live ultrasound, is densely innervated with sensory neurons and responds to mechanical deformation by altering cellular signaling. Literally thickens and crosslinks around the sites of chronically held tension. The psoas, because it attaches directly to the diaphragm via connective tissue at the thoracolumbar junction, begins to pull the breath short every time it fires. You develop what amounts to a structural memory of threat written into your connective tissue, maintained by your posture, reinforced with every abbreviated inhale. Stephen Porges, whose polyvagal theory has reshaped our understanding of the autonomic nervous system, identified that the nerve responsible for the state of genuine safety, the ventral vagal branch of the vagus nerve, is intimately responsive to the rhythm and depth of the breath. Specifically, the exhale activates it. A long, complete exhale stimulates the vagal brake, slowing the heart, releasing the jaw, softening the gut, signaling at the most ancient level of the nervous system that the coast is clear. When fear compresses the exhale chronically, this signal never fully arrives. The body lives in a permanent mild emergency it cannot name, but the reverse is equally true. You can send that signal deliberately through breath, through the specific rhythm and sequencing of nasal and oral airflow, and the nervous system, which does not distinguish between an authentic experience of safety and a skillfully constructed one, begins to reorganize itself around the new input. This is the mechanism, not metaphor, architecture, and the Apache tradition built a practice directly upon it. The knowledge that breath is the sovereign medicine of the nervous system is not new. It is in fact so old that its origins disappear into the pre-literate darkness before recorded history, surfacing in culture after culture with uncanny structural similarity, as if each tradition was independently discovering the same anatomical truth. The Taoist Neigong practices of ancient China, codified in texts like the Huang Di Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's classic of medicine, described the breath as the vehicle of Wei Qi, the protective life force, and prescribed specific exhalation-dominant breathing to dissolve what they called stagnant qi in the triple warmer meridian, a channel that maps almost precisely onto the modern understanding of the psoas and the raka lumbar fascia. The prescription was not to relax. It was to breathe the stagnation out of the body through extended toned exhalation, the oldest known version of vagal activation. In the yogic tradition of pre-classical India, the Upanishads describe prana not as breath exactly, but as the animating current that breath carries, and the Kumbhaka practices, the deliberate retentions and releases, were understood to work on the subtle body's energetic knots, called granthis, located at the solar plexus and the base of the spine, which correspond with precision to the diaphragmatic junction and the psoas attachments. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is explicit. These knots are not spiritual obstacles only. They are places where life force is trapped by unexpressed experience. The Sufi tradition preserved in its Sama ceremonies, those devotional gatherings of whirling and chant, a breathwork technology embedded in the dhikr, the rhythmic vocal exhalation of sacred syllables that force the exhale long and resonant, stimulating the vagus nerve through both the breath and the vibration of the voice against the sternum, a technique so effective that modern researchers like Sarah Lazar at Harvard have documented measurable changes in long-term practitioners of related contemplative techniques. And then there is the Hermetic principle that underlies all of these, the principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without, articulated in the Emerald Tablet and carried through the Western esoteric tradition, that the microcosm of the body mirrors the macrocosm of the cosmos, and that the rhythm of the breath is the body's participation in the deeper rhythm of expansion and contraction that governs all living systems. To breathe fully is to participate fully. To hold the breath is to withdraw from life itself. What Stephen Porges did was not invent this knowledge. He gave it a molecular address. He traced the nerve fibers, mapped the receptors, measured the heart rate variability, and confirmed in the language of peer-reviewed science what the Apache medicine practitioners, the Taoist Neigong masters, the yogic sages, and the Sufi mystics had encoded in ceremony and practice across thousands of years. That the exhale is the key, that the body can be brought home through the breath, and that this homecoming is not a feeling but a measurable physiological state available to anyone willing to learn the rhythm. There's a reason the usual approaches to fear keep falling short, and it is not a failure of discipline or desire. It is that thinking about fear, analyzing it, reframing it, is operating in an entirely different medium than the one where fear actually lives. You cannot talk tissue into releasing. You cannot convince fascia with logic. What you need is a body-first practice, one that enters through the breath and works downward into the structure, that sequences its movements to follow the actual pathway of the nervous system rather than the wishful map of the thinking mind. And if you have tried breathwork before, perhaps with an app or a guided meditation, and found that it helped in the moment, but nothing really shifted underneath, it is because isolated breath exercises without the somatic movement that allows the tissue to release the stored pattern, will only ever produce temporary relief. The special guide called Healing in Motion 22 Somatic Cycles, Release Trauma, Restore Flow and Return to Creation was built precisely for this gap. It is organized around 22 somatic cycles that move through the body in sequence, combining the Apache breathing method with targeted fascial release and vagal activation, so that the breath is not used in isolation but is woven into a complete practice that addresses the tissue, the nerve, and the rhythm simultaneously. People who have worked through it have shared what that experience was actually like, the specific shifts they noticed, the unexpected releases, the quality of the calm that followed, and those real accounts are pinned in the first comment beneath this video. Read what they wrote. Let their words tell you what argument cannot. The link to access the guide is there as well, in that first pinned comment, and it is available for a limited time. If something in what you have heard today felt like recognition rather than new information, that is your body already knowing. The guide is the next step. The body has been waiting for science to catch up. For decades, the dominant framework of Western psychology placed fear in the brain, specifically in the amygdala, and treated the body as little more than a reporting station for emotions that were believed to originate upstairs. Therapy meant talking. Healing meant insight. Change meant understanding. And then the evidence began arriving from directions no one expected, and it has not stopped arriving since. Bessel van der Kolk's clinical research, gathered over 30 years of working with trauma survivors and documented in The Body Keeps the Score, demonstrated something that fundamentally reorganized the field. That traumatic memory is not stored as narrative, but as sensation, as posture, as the way a person holds their shoulders when they feel watched, as the specific quality of breath that tightens when a certain kind of silence enters a room. The brain's language centers, van der Kolk showed using neuroimaging, actually go offline during trauma recall, while the sensory and motor regions light up with extraordinary intensity. The body is not remembering metaphorically. It is reenacting, in real time, in tissue. Stephen Parkhurst refined this understanding by mapping the actual neural architecture of safety. His polyvagal theory, which restructured the classical two-branch model of the autonomic nervous system into 3 distinct states, revealed that the ventral vagal system, the branch associated with social engagement, connection, and felt safety, is anatomically inseparable from the muscles of the face, the middle ear, the larynx, and critically, the respiratory diaphragm. These are not separate systems that happen to influence each other. They are one integrated circuit, and the breath is the only part of that circuit you can consciously operate. Every other function is automatic. The breath is the door. Neuroplasticity research, advanced through the work of Michael Merzenich at the University of California, San Francisco, confirmed that this door, once opened deliberately and repeatedly, does not simply create temporary calm. It rewires. The brain physically reorganizes around new patterns of input, growing new synaptic connections, pruning old threat detection highways that no longer serve, shifting the default baseline of the nervous system toward what Porges calls ventral vagal tone. This is not willpower. This is cellular restructuring through repetition. And then there is the emerging field of epigenetics, particularly the work of researchers like Michael Meany at McGill University, showing that chronic stress patterns do not merely affect behavior, they alter gene expression, switching on inflammatory pathways and switching off the very genes responsible for stress regulation. Breathwork-based interventions have been shown to reverse some of these epigenetic markers. The practice does not just feel different, it reads differently at the level of your DNA. This is the ancient knowledge rendered in molecular language. The Apache practitioners were not working with mysticism as an alternative to physiology. They were working with physiology through the only instruments available to them: ceremony, rhythm, breath, and an extraordinarily precise attention to the felt interior of the living body. The science did not discover something new, it named something very, very old. The practice itself begins on the floor, and this is not arbitrary. The floor is the first teacher. When you lower yourself onto your back on a firm surface, legs uncrossed, arms slightly away from the sides with the palms facing upward and open, you are already beginning to send a signal. The nervous system reads the position of the body, supine, open, unguarded. It receives information that the environment is safe enough to release vertical vigilance, and something in the brainstem begins to shift before you have taken a single intentional breath. Spend 1 full minute simply noticing. Do not change anything yet. Notice where the breath goes naturally, how high in the chest it travels, how quickly the exhale ends, whether there is a pause, a hold, a reluctance at the bottom of the outbreath where the lungs want to refill before they have truly emptied. That reluctance is the compression. You are meeting it, not fighting it. Now begin phase 1, which the Apache tradition centered on the nasal inhale, slow and deliberate, drawn in through the nose over a count of 4, allowing the belly to rise first, then the ribs to expand laterally, then finally the chest to lift, filling in that specific order, base to crown, earth to sky. This sequencing matters because it recruits the diaphragm fully, rather than the accessory muscles of the neck and shoulders, and a fully recruited diaphragm massages the vagus nerve with every breath cycle. At the top of the inhale, pause, not a held breath, a suspended moment of arrival lasting only 2 counts, a gathering before the release. Now, the exhale, and this is where the practice concentrates its real power. Open the mouth and release through a soft, toned sound, not forced, not theatrical. Simply the natural sound of air moving past a slightly open jaw and a gently vibrating throat. A sound like the beginning of the syllable, how, or the quieter cousin of a sigh given permission. Let the exhale last 8 counts. Let it be longer than feels necessary. Let it reach all the way to the floor of the breath, past the point where the mind says that is enough, into the final 2 counts where the belly falls completely and the psoas, that deep corridor of ancient alertness, receives the gentle pressure of the emptied abdomen like a hand placed quietly on a tightly wound spring. Do this for 9 complete cycles. After the 9th exhale, breathe naturally for 30 seconds and simply receive what is present. You may notice warmth moving through the limbs. You may notice a slight trembling in the thighs or the jaw, and if you do, do not suppress it. That trembling is the completion of the survival cycle Peter Levine described. It is the body finishing a sentence that fear interrupted. Let it speak. Let the tissue say what it has been holding. Then begin phase 2, bringing one hand to rest on the sternum and one on the lower abdomen, and return to the same ratio, 4 in through the nose, 2 suspended, 8 out through the open mouth. This time adding the quiet internal attention to the space between your hands, the corridor of the torso, breathing into the fear's address and breathing it out, not as a thought, but as a sensation that rises and releases, until the tissue begins, cycle by cycle, to unknot itself in the one language it has always understood. There is a particular kind of person who finds this practice not as a course they enrolled in, but at the bottom of a very long descent, and her name, for the purpose of this telling, is no one's and everyone's. She was the kind of person others described as composed, the kind who handled things, who knew what to say at funerals and what to order in restaurants and how to make every room feel managed. She had not cried at her father's death, not because she did not feel it, but because she was the one holding the clipboard at the hospice, and someone had to. That was 7 years before she found herself sitting in a parked car outside a grocery store at 10 in the morning. Unable to go in, unable to name why, feeling a pressure in her chest that had no story attached to it. She tried therapy. It helped her understand things. She tried medication. It took the volume down. She tried yoga, and in the long savasana at the end of class, something would almost open and then close again before she could reach it, like a window glimpsed from a moving train. What shifted was not a dramatic moment. It was the 9th exhale of the 3rd session with this practice, when the sound coming out of her mouth stopped being controlled and became something else, something that had been waiting behind 7 years of competence. And she did not sob exactly. She made a sound she had never made before, low and long and entirely involuntary, and the pressure in her chest, which she had stopped noticing because it had been there so long it felt like her, moved downward through her belly and out through the soles of her feet, and was simply gone. Not managed, gone. The grocery store was easy after that, not because she had resolved anything she understood, because her body had resolved something it had been holding since the clipboard, since the hospice, since the 1,000 practiced moments of being fine that had preceded that one. She said afterward that the most disorienting part was not the release. It was realizing how much of her personality she had built around the thing that had just left, and then, with some time, the more wonderful realization that what remained was not emptiness but something earlier, something she recognized from childhood, a quality of attention that was simply present, simply open, already at home. The resistance you may be feeling right now is not weakness. It is an artifact of a culture that has systematically taught you to distrust the body's own intelligence and to locate authority outside yourself. In the expert, the prescription, the measurable outcome, you have been educated out of embodiment so gradually and so thoroughly that you may not recognize it as education. You may simply believe that you are not the kind of person who does this sort of thing, that breathwork is for people who burn incense and have a relationship with their feelings, that you are too practical, too rational, too busy, too far gone. That belief is itself the compression. Notice where you feel it. Notice that it probably lives somewhere in the chest, or just behind the eyes, or in a slight tightening of the jaw. Notice that it is not actually a thought. It is a posture that has learned to speak. The second layer resistance is subtler and more honest. It is the fear that if you open this, you will not be able to close it again. That the unexpressed grief or rage or terror that has been compressed for so long will emerge at the wrong time, in the wrong place, in a form you cannot control. This fear is not irrational. It is the nervous system doing its job of protecting what it does not yet know is safe to release. You do not overcome this fear by convincing yourself it is wrong. You work with it by making the container trustworthy before asking for the contents. This is why starting small is not a compromise. It is the method. Begin with 3 cycles, not 9. Begin on a day when you have 20 minutes and no obligation immediately after. Begin with the hand on the sternum and the hand on the belly, because touch is itself a vagal activator, and the warmth of your own palm on your own chest is one of the most ancient signals of self-safety the mammalian nervous system knows. Let the practice be brief enough that the nervous system can observe that nothing catastrophic followed, can begin to build the evidence base it requires to trust the opening. And know this, with the quiet certainty of everything that has come before in this knowing, the body does not want to hold this. The holding was never its preference. It held because it had to, because there was no other option in that moment, because you needed to keep moving. The practice does not force a release. It simply demonstrates through rhythm and repetition that now is finally safe enough to let go. The deeper truth that all of this reveals is one that takes time to fully land, because it runs counter to the entire architecture of modern self-improvement culture, which is built on the premise that you need to become something you are not yet. The truth the practice returns you to is that what you are seeking has never been absent. It has been compressed. There is a categorical difference between those two things, and that difference is everything. Peter Levine, whose somatic experiencing work gave language to the body's innate capacity to heal itself, wrote that the human organism is, by its very nature, oriented toward healing, that the symptoms of trauma are not signs of breakage, but signs of incomplete processes seeking completion. The body is not damaged. It is interrupted. The practice does not repair you. It resumes you. The mystic and poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote in Letters to a Young Poet words that seem to have been waiting for precisely this context. Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love. The compressed fear in the tissue is not your enemy. It is an older, unfinished version of yourself that never received the signal that the emergency was over. The practice is how you send that signal. It is how you reach back through time, through the medium of the breath, and tell that part of your body what it most needed to hear. You made it. You can put it down now. You are home. This is biological restoration, not self-improvement, not the construction of a better version. The return to an original state of open, sovereign, inhabitable calm that was always your native condition, before the compressions, before the archives of swallowed alarm, before the personality that formed itself around the holding. That state is not a destination. It is a remembering. And the breath, this ancient instrument, this first language of the living body, is how you remember. If something in what you have heard today landed not as information, but as recognition, That is worth paying attention to, because recognition is the body already knowing what the mind is still processing. This channel exists for exactly that moment, the moment between knowing and returning. And if you want to continue this journey of coming home to the body that was always yours, subscribe now and turn on notifications so that each new piece of this work finds you when you need it. In the comments below, type this declaration exactly as written. I release what was never mine to carry, and I breathe myself home. Let those words, in your own handwriting, even digital handwriting, become a small ceremony of intention, a signal to your nervous system that this is the direction you are choosing if someone in your life is caught in the glass, slightly outside themselves, managing but not fully inhabiting. Share this video with them without explanation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer is simply the opening of a door. And now, click anywhere on this screen. Another video is waiting, another layer of this unraveling, and your body already knows the way.